The early morning sun burned gold across the Naval Amphibious Base in Coronado, California. Heat waves shimmered off the tarmac, the salty scent of the Pacific hanging in the air like a silent witness. Lieutenant Marcus Hall stepped off the transport plane, his boots crunching against the gravel. This was the crucible of the world's most elite SEAL snipers, where every man and woman was tested beyond the limits of human endurance. Marcus had trained for this moment for years. He knew what to expect. Or so he thought. Among the dozen new candidates, one figure drew his attention immediately. She moved with a calm precision, her steps deliberate, measured, almost too quiet to notice. Her uniform was immaculate, her hair pulled back in a tight braid. No one else seemed to notice her at first, until she stopped at the edge of the assembly, scanning the grounds with eyes that were unsettlingly calm. Marcus frowned. Something about her demeanor was different. She was Elena Ward. No one spoke to her yet, but whispers began immediately. "Who's the new girl?" One recruit muttered. "Did she even graduate sniper school?" Another laughed nervously, leaning on his rifle. "Bet she's just some officer's brat trying to get brownie points." Marcus didn't join the conversation. He observed quietly. There was no braggadocio in her posture. No hesitancy. Only focus. The instructors blew a whistle, signaling the beginning of the orientation. The recruits marched into the barracks, the sun at their backs. Marcus noticed Elena fall in line silently, never making a mistaken step. When they reached the firing range, the first drill began. Marcus was confident he had one of the best shots in his cohort. He watched as Elena set up her rifle with meticulous care. Her hands moved over the weapon as if they already knew its entire history. She didn't fumble, didn't hesitate. She simply worked. The first targets appeared at 800 meters. Marcus exhaled slowly, adjusted his scope, and squeezed off his rounds. They hit their mark, though just barely. He glanced at Elena, expecting the same nervous adjustment of scope, the tiny tremor in her hands, the slight hesitation most newcomers exhibited. But she didn't flinch. She didn't blink. 1, 2, 3 rounds perfectly grouped. Dead center. A silence fell across the range. Even the instructors stopped their commentary. The wind rustled, carrying sand across the asphalt, and Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. It wasn't just skill, it was unnatural, almost mechanical. The whisper started again among the recruits, but quieter now. Marcus realized that what he was witnessing wasn't just talent. It was precision honed to a level that seemed impossible. After the drill, Marcus approached her. "Nice shooting," he said casually, trying to mask the curiosity in his tone. She looked up at him for the first time, her gray eyes calm but piercing. She nodded once, no smile, no comment. Her silence was a statement in itself. During the next hour, the recruits moved through the obstacle course. Marcus watched Elena navigate each challenge with effortless grace. She climbed walls taller than him without hesitation, vaulted barriers, and ran with a speed that seemed preternatural. He had expected awkwardness, expected mistakes, but there were none. Marcus began to feel a mix of admiration and unease. That evening, the recruits gathered for roll call. Marcus took a seat at the edge of the formation and observed her from a distance. Elena sat quietly, sharpening the edge of her combat knife with methodical care. Others were laughing, swapping stories of prior missions, trying to impress one another. She didn't age. She didn't laugh. She didn't need to. Curiosity gnawed at him. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was there something about her that made even the instructor's glances linger longer than usual? Marcus was used to reading people, but she was unreadable, a closed book in a sea of open pages. He tried to catch her eye again. She didn't meet it. Instead, She traced something in the dust with the tip of her knife, small, intricate lines, almost like a code. Later that night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay on his cot, listening to the distant waves, replaying the day over and over. Elena's image kept surfacing: the calmness of her hands, the precision of her shots, the way she moved with an almost invisible authority. Something about her was different. He couldn't shake the feeling that she had already survived far more than anyone else in that base had, far more than he could imagine. The next morning, the recruits gathered for a live fire exercise at the long-range course. Marcus expected her to falter under the pressure of distance and wind. He waited for the telltale signs of fatigue: sweat on the brow, a minor tremor in the finger. But she didn't show any. Elena laid prone, checked her scope, adjusted her breath, and fired 3 rounds. The shots landed so perfectly that one of the instructors muttered under his breath, "I've never seen that in a recruit." Marcus's heart thumped. She wasn't just skilled, she was something else entirely. The whispers of the barracks floated back to him. Trained by a ghost, someone had said. Ridiculous. Legends were for bedtime stories, not reality. But as he watched her holster the rifle with quiet authority, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, those legends had a grain of truth. By midday, Elena had become the silent epicenter of attention without even trying. No one dared challenge her. No one dared joke at her expense. Marcus, stubborn as ever, tried to approach again. "You've got a name?" he asked. "Elena," she replied, calm and flat, with no hint of emotion. He wanted to ask more, to probe, to understand why she seemed untouchable. But the day's drills resumed, and she vanished into motion, her presence commanding respect without a single word. Marcus realized he was already behind, not in skill, but in understanding. She had arrived at Coronado, and she had already reshaped the battlefield before it had even begun. As the sun set over the Pacific, painting the horizon blood red, Marcus sat on the edge of the firing range and watched her silhouette. There was a weight in her posture, a silent story, a shadow of experience that no one would dare question. He didn't know it yet, but Elena Ward was not just another recruit. She was a force, trained in ways no one at Coronado could comprehend. And the legend, the ghost, was closer than he could ever imagine. Marcus exhaled slowly. Tomorrow would bring new drills, new tests, but he knew one truth already. She was nothing like anyone he had ever faced, nothing like anyone he could predict. And deep down, he feared that by the end of training, he would understand why the whispers called her the ghost's protégé. The next morning, Coronado Base was alive with the sharp smell of gunpowder and the distant crash of waves against the cliffs. Marcus had slept poorly, turning Elena's precision over and over in his mind. How could a recruit one he barely knew move and shoot with the uncanny skill of someone who had been in battle countless times? But it wasn't just her skill. There was something in her eyes, gray and stormy, that unsettled him more than any target or obstacle course ever could. Elena moved silently across the range, her boots barely touching the gravel. Each step was measured, every motion deliberate, almost ritualistic. She checked her rifle carefully, adjusting scope and bipod with the familiarity of a soldier who had lived by the weapon for years. Marcus noticed that she never rushed, never faltered, and never glanced at anyone else. It was as if the world revolved around her focus alone, and everyone else were merely background noise. The drill began, a moving target 900 meters away, with a sudden wind shift that would throw off even the most experienced marksman. Marcus adjusted his scope, calculated the angle, and fired. The first round struck high. The second, slightly to the left. Frustration burned. He had trained for this, yet he had misjudged the wind by half a degree. Elena knelt beside her rifle, adjusting her scope with quiet, precise movements. Her eyes narrowed not in concentration, but in calculation. She exhaled slowly, accounted for the wind, the humidity, the angle of the sun, and squeezed the trigger. One shot, dead center. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. The shot had been so perfect, so almost impossible, that he swore he could hear the impact echo in his chest. The instructors muttered among themselves. One senior sergeant leaned toward another and said, "I don't know who she is, but she's something else." Marcus finally understood the whispers he had heard yesterday weren't just idle gossip. She was in a league no one could touch. After the drill, recruits dispersed, and Marcus found himself trailing Elena. He wanted to ask questions, anything to unravel the mystery, but she didn't respond. Instead, she moved to the edge of the range, crouched low, and began making notes in a small, tattered notebook. Curious, Marcus peered over her shoulder. The pages weren't filled with casual scribbles. They were diagrams, calculations, tables of wind speed and trajectory, and meticulous sketches of rifles and targets. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked cautiously. Elena didn't look up. "Preparing," she said softly, her voice calm but carrying an authority that demanded attention. She didn't elaborate. Marcus felt a strange mixture of awe and frustration. This wasn't just training. This was art, science, and discipline fused into a weapon of precision. The day wore on with relentless drills, and Marcus kept stealing glances at Elena. She never spoke unnecessarily. She moved through the tasks like a shadow, leaving others scrambling to keep up. During the break, some recruits approached her, trying to break through her silence. "Hey, new girl, you even been in combat?" one asked, smirking. Elena didn't answer. She simply raised her eyes to his face, and the smirk died on his lips. There was no arrogance, no fear, only a piercing storm-gray gaze that seemed to look right through him. Marcus felt a chill. He realized then that her silence was a weapon in itself, more dangerous than any gun. Later, during a rifle cleaning exercise, Marcus caught her whispering something under her breath. He leaned closer, curiosity overpowering caution. "What are you saying?" She froze for a second, then continued silently. He couldn't hear her. But when he looked at her rifle, he noticed faint, almost imperceptible etchings on the buttstock, tiny symbols, geometric shapes, and a single word that made his heart skip: ghost. Marcus stepped back. Stunned. Ghost. The name of the legendary SEAL sniper who had vanished years ago, rumored to have completed missions no one else dared touch. A man who could strike with deadly precision in impossible conditions. The very man whose legend haunted SEAL recruits like a specter. His mind raced. Could it be? No, it was impossible. Ghost was gone, or at least that's what everyone believed. Yet here she was, a woman whose skill was uncanny, whose silence carried weight, and whose rifle wore the mark of the man himself. The pieces didn't fit. And that unsettled Marcus more than the hardest drills ever could. Night fell over Coronado, and the barracks were quiet except for the low hum of the ceiling fans. Marcus lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He kept replaying the day's events, the flawless shots, her eerie calm, the notebook filled with calculations, and the ghostly etchings on her rifle. He knew one thing: Elena Ward was no ordinary recruit. She carried a weight, a story, a shadow from a past no one else could imagine. He finally drifted into a restless sleep, only to awaken in the middle of the night to soft whispers from the hall. Curious, he stepped out and saw her kneeling outside, under the dim light of a single bulb, her rifle beside her. She wasn't aiming at anything, but her hands moved over it like a ritual. She murmured something faintly, words he couldn't hear, but the reverence in her tone made him step back. Marcus returned to his cot, mind racing. The image of her shadowed figure against the dim light stayed with him, refusing to fade. She was focused, calm, and untouchable, a puzzle that no one in Coronado could solve. And deep down, he realized that the real test was not the drills or the long-range courses. It was understanding the woman behind the rifle. The following morning, drills resumed, and Marcus noticed subtle changes. Other recruits seemed hesitant around her, careful not to appear inadequate. The instructors, while maintaining authority, whispered among themselves. One of them muttered, "She's different. Something about her. It's like she's seen things we can't imagine." During a live fire exercise, Marcus watched Elena set up her rifle. She didn't glance at the target. Instead, she looked through the scope and exhaled slowly. Her fingers squeezed the trigger once. The round hit perfectly. The second shot, even further. Marcus realized she didn't calculate like a soldier or a mathematician. She calculated like someone who had lived on the battlefield, someone who had seen life and death in a single heartbeat. After the exercise, Marcus approached again, this time unable to contain himself. "How are you? Doing this?" he asked, his voice a mixture of awe and frustration. Elena looked at him, her storm-gray eyes meeting his. There was a shadow there, something he couldn't name. "Preparation," she said softly. "And experience." Marcus's heart pounded. There was a quiet power in her words, in her presence, in everything about her. She wasn't just skilled. She was trained by someone whose name was spoken in hushed reverence, the Ghost, and Marcus knew, with an uneasy certainty, that he was witnessing the legacy of a legend. By midday, Elena's reputation had spread across the base. No one challenged her. No one questioned her. And Marcus, who prided himself on knowing people, realized he was already outmatched, not in skill, but in understanding. She had arrived at Coronado, and in a single day, she had changed the rhythm of the entire unit. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the range, Marcus sat alone and watched her work silently. She moved with purpose, precision, and an intensity that no words could describe. He knew, deep down, that she carried more than just skill. She carried a story, a history, and perhaps even a secret that could redefine everything he thought he knew about the SEAL sniper program. And he realized the unshakable truth. Elena Ward was not just another recruit. She was a force, forged in ways that Coronado could barely comprehend. The storm in her eyes, the ghost in her rifle, and the silence she carried, they were all warnings. Marcus didn't yet know what the future would bring, but he understood one thing clearly. From this moment on, nothing would ever be the same. The following week at Coronado, the heat was relentless, beating down on the recruits like a physical test in itself. Marcus Hawley moved through the obstacle course with practiced efficiency, yet even his seasoned body and honed reflexes couldn't quiet the unease building in his mind. Elena Ward moved beside him, fluid, silent, and unnervingly calm. It wasn't just her precision, it was her aura. Every motion carried a weight, a story, a memory Marcus couldn't comprehend. By the afternoon, during a break in the training, some of the younger recruits gathered under a tree, swapping whispered stories. "You ever hear of Ghost?" one asked, voice barely above the wind. Marcus, curious, leaned in. "Ghost? The sniper legend?" Another replied, "The one who can shoot through fog, through shadows, through the heart of danger itself? They say he disappeared after a classified mission in Afghanistan. Never came back." A snicker went around. "Yeah, right. Probably just another SEAL myth to scare us," said a recruit, trying to laugh it off. Marcus tried to mask his interest, but his gaze drifted instinctively toward Elena. She was across the range, kneeling by her rifle, cleaning it with methodical precision. Her movements didn't waver, and yet something about the way she handled the weapon made Marcus's stomach tighten. She seemed familiar with legends, almost as if she had known them personally. As the recruits continued gossiping, Marcus overheard the most unsettling comment yet. Some say he trained someone before he vanished. Nobody knows who. Some say she's out there somewhere, carrying on his skills. Marcus froze. Something clicked in his mind. The etchings on her rifle, the way she calculated each shot, the calm in her eyes that seemed to see things no one else could. Could it be? No, that was impossible. Ghost had been gone for years. Yet every instinct screamed at him that Elena was tied to the man in ways he couldn't yet understand. The afternoon drill was a long-range shooting exercise, and Marcus found himself paired with her for observation. The wind had picked up, gusting unpredictably, and the instructors warned that many of the shots could miss even the most experienced marksman. Marcus adjusted his scope, calculating the distance, the humidity, the wind shift. He fired one round. It landed slightly right, another, slightly left. His hands shook ever so slightly, tension gnawing at his mind. Elena, meanwhile, moved calmly into position, kneeling with the rifle steady on her bipod. She exhaled, adjusted her breath, and fired a single round. The target, a steel silhouette at 1,000 meters, shattered perfectly in the center. Not just center dead center. The instructors stopped mid-comment, exchanging glances. Marcus could feel his own jaw tighten. He had trained with the best, but what he saw now defied logic. The whispers of Ghost's legend in the barracks seemed suddenly real. During the evening, as the sun bled crimson over the Pacific, Marcus decided he couldn't wait any longer. He approached Elena as she cleaned her rifle once again, sitting cross-legged under the fading light. "I need to ask you something," he said cautiously. She didn't look up. "What?" "Ghost," Marcus said, his voice low. "Do you know him?" Elena paused, her hands stilling on the rifle. Finally, she looked up. Her gray eyes were stormy, unreadable, and for the first time, Marcus felt the weight of a history he couldn't begin to understand. "He trained me," she said softly. Her voice carried no pride, only a calm that made Marcus shiver. "He didn't just train me, he saved me." Marcus stared. He wanted to laugh, to dismiss it, but the tremor in her voice, the shadow behind her eyes, and the way her hands lingered over the rifle told him she was speaking truth. Ghost, the man of legend, the sniper who had disappeared without a trace, was real. And she had known him. That night, Marcus lay awake, turning her words over in his mind. Ghost had vanished years before, yet here was a woman moving like him, shooting like him, calculating like him. He realized she wasn't just a legend herself. She was a living connection to a man who had been more myth than man for the SEALs. And he couldn't shake the unease building inside him. Days passed, and the training intensified. Marcus noticed that other recruits began to leave Elena's space, an unspoken respect or perhaps fear settling over the group. She didn't speak unnecessarily. She didn't explain her movements. She simply excelled at everything, her shadow stretching over the range in a way no one could compete with. During a night navigation exercise, Marcus found himself paired with her again. The moonlight glinted off the sand, shadows twisting unnaturally in the dark. Marcus had been in countless night drills, but tonight felt different. Every step she took was deliberate, almost predatory. She stopped occasionally, scanning the horizon as if seeing something invisible to him. "Do you always move like that?" he asked quietly. Elena's lips curved faintly, almost imperceptibly. "You learn to when you've been trained by someone who never makes mistakes," she said, her tone neutral but carrying weight. Marcus felt a chill. It wasn't arrogance in her voice, it was experience. Knowledge passed down from someone who had lived and survived impossible missions. Marcus tried to push further. "You mean Ghost? She didn't respond. Only her eyes flicked to the horizon. For a moment, Marcus thought he saw recognition, even longing in them. A shadow of someone lost. She whispered something under her breath, just low enough for him to catch the last word. Holloway. Marcus froze. Carter Holloway. The ghost. The SEAL whose legend was whispered with reverence across training bases and covert operations. And here she was connected to him in a way that no recruit could understand. The next day, an instructor called a surprise drill, a live-fire challenge with multiple moving targets at irregular distances. Marcus tried to focus, but his mind kept drifting to Elena, to her calm efficiency, to the ghost's name etched on her rifle, and to the storm he glimpsed in her eyes. She positioned herself on a ridge overlooking the targets. Marcus watched as she calculated the angle, accounted for the wind, and fired. 1, 2, 3. Every target hit dead center, each shot faster than anyone else could manage. The instructors murmured in disbelief. Marcus realized he was witnessing something that wasn't just training. It was a legacy being carried forward in real time. After the drill, Marcus finally approached her, unable to contain himself. You really knew him? He asked. She turned, gray eyes meeting his, and for the first time, Marcus felt the weight of her story. I trained under him, she said, voice low. He taught me how to survive when no one else would. He taught me that skill isn't enough, you need purpose. And I carry that with me every time I pick up this rifle. Marcus swallowed hard. He realized he had underestimated her in every way. Her silence, her calm, her efficiency. It wasn't arrogance. It was the presence of someone who had been forged in the fires of battle, someone who had survived by learning from a man whose legend had become more than myth. That night, Marcus lay awake again, thinking about her words, the etchings on the rifle, and the storm behind her eyes. He realized that Elena Ward wasn't just a recruit. She was a bridge to a legend, a living continuation of a sniper whose skills and wisdom had been whispered about in secret for years. And he understood one unshakable truth. In the days to come, he wouldn't just have to compete with her. He would have to understand her, trust her, and maybe even rely on her. Because Elena Ward carried a shadow with her, a shadow called the Ghost, and that shadow was more real than anything he had ever faced. As the moon rose over the base, casting long silver shadows across the range, Marcus stared into the night, finally understanding what the other recruits had whispered in awe. Elena Ward was not just a sniper. She was a force. And the Ghost's legend was no longer lost to history. It was alive, in her hands, in her eyes, and in every calculated, deadly motion she made. Marcus knew one thing with certainty. Coronado would never be the same. And neither would he. The Nevada desert was unforgiving. The sun had baked the sand into a shimmering haze, and winds whipped unpredictably across the ridges, turning each breath into grit. The SEAL training unit had been sent for a joint live-fire exercise, testing marksmanship under extreme conditions. Marcus Holloway adjusted his scope, shielding his eyes from the storm of dust, trying to measure wind, distance, and humidity as best he could. His chest tightened with tension. This was a drill meant to separate the men from the boys. And today, Elena Ward would prove she was neither. As the team advanced toward their positions, the storm picked up, visibility dropping to near zero. The instructors' voices crackled over radios, but static swallowed their words, leaving only shouts and hand signals. Targets were spread across the desert floor, some malfunctioning due to the sand and dust. Marcus's group was pinned behind a ridge, scrambling to maintain sightlines while gusts of wind tossed sand into their eyes and throats. Marcus swallowed hard, gripping his rifle. He could barely see the outline of the first target, let alone aim. Panic crept into his thoughts. Even a seasoned sniper would struggle under these conditions. And yet, across the ridge, he saw her. Elena. She moved with unnerving calm, a shadow among the chaos. Marcus couldn't see her face, only the silhouette of her body, steady and unyielding. She dropped into prone position, iPod digging into the sand, and began scanning. Marcus noticed something chilling. She didn't seem to fight the storm. She used it. She accounted for every gust, every grain of sand, every shift in the horizon. Her eyes narrowed, gray and cold, as if seeing through the dust itself. The wind screamed. The targets, erratic and malfunctioning, moved unpredictably across the desert floor. Marcus fired around, missing entirely, the shot swallowed by sand and wind. Another attempt off by inches that felt like miles. Frustration clawed at him, but he couldn't stop watching Elena. She exhaled once and fired. The shot rang clear, impossibly precise. One target exploded dead center. Not the first, not the second, but the first she aimed for. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. It was more than skill. It was something beyond human. A second shot followed, and another target fell, obliterated exactly as she intended. The instructors' whistles blew frantically, but even their voices seemed small against the desert roar. Marcus could only stare, mouth dry, as a rifle clicked calmly back into place after each perfect impact. Then came the impossible moment. A rogue drone target, erratic and spinning, moved across the desert in a pattern that no human could calculate under these conditions. Marcus tracked it through his scope, heart hammering, but knew he didn't have a chance. He tightened his grip and fired. Miss, miss. Elena shifted slightly, adjusting her scope with movements so subtle Marcus almost missed them. She exhaled slowly, finger steady on the trigger. One shot. The drone target stopped mid-motion, its core destroyed dead center. Marcus felt the ground shift under him, as if the impossible had just become reality. He crawled closer afterward, compelled by curiosity, and finally saw it etched into the bullet casing, a small cross. His blood ran cold. He recognized it instantly. The ghost, the legend, the man who had disappeared years ago, whose skill had been whispered in awe and fear across SEAL training grounds, was not a myth. And Elena Ward carried his mark in every action, every shot, every calculated move. The instructors gathered afterward, murmuring among themselves. "I've never seen anything like that in training," one said. She's something else entirely." Marcus didn't hear them. He was staring at her from a distance, stunned. The wind had settled slightly, revealing her face and profile. Calm, determined, untouchable. She didn't smile, didn't boast. She simply packed up her rifle and walked back to the ridge, her eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for a ghost only she could see. He approached cautiously. How did you do that?" he asked, trying to hide the awe in his voice. Elena didn't answer immediately. She knelt, rechecking her rifle, cleaning the scope with methodical care. "Preparation," she said finally. "Discipline. And experience." Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine. She didn't speak of fear or instinct. She spoke of something that required years, a life shaped by precision and survival. And he realized with sudden clarity, she wasn't just skilled. She was trained by a man whose methods had become legend, the Ghost. Later that night, Marcus couldn't sleep. The storm in the desert had passed, but the image of Elena, moving through it with impossible precision, stayed in his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the small cross etched on the bullet casing. One shot. That was all it had taken to reveal everything. He kept turning it over. The ghost hadn't just disappeared. He had lived, trained her, and left a legacy that was unstoppable. And Elena was carrying it forward. Marcus understood now why the whispers had spread so fast across the base, why instructors paused mid-drill to watch her, and why no recruit dared challenge her authority. The following morning, Marcus approached Elena quietly, finding her on the edge of the training range, kneeling again over her rifle. The desert wind had settled, leaving only the smell of gunpowder and scorched sand. "Why didn't anyone tell us?" he asked softly. "About Ghost, about you?" Elena's gray eyes met his. They were calm, but Marcus caught the ghost of memory in them, an almost imperceptible shadow. "Because it doesn't matter," she said. "What matters is what I do with what he taught me." Her words were simple, yet heavy. Marcus realized she wasn't showing off. She wasn't trying to intimidate. She was living every lesson the ghost had passed on, every calculation, every trigger pull, every choice in the chaos of battle. She carried a story he could barely begin to understand. In the next few days, Elena's legend among the recruits grew. People spoke in hushed tones about the storm in Nevada, about the impossible shots she had taken, about the ghostly mark on her bullet casings. Marcus noticed a subtle change in the unit. Recruits were quieter, more careful, respectful, or perhaps afraid. No one challenged her, not openly. And Marcus, who prided himself on understanding people, realized he was already behind in understanding her. By the time the sun set over the desert, casting long shadows across the range, Marcus found her sitting alone, rifle across her knees, staring into the horizon. He approached slowly, hesitant to break her concentration. She didn't look up, yet he felt her awareness, her attention, sharp as a blade. "I don't understand," he admitted. "How can one person be this good?" Elena finally lifted her gaze. "Because I learned from the best," she said softly. "The ghost doesn't teach mistakes. He doesn't forgive carelessness. He doesn't waste time. I carry what he gave me. That's why I succeed." Marcus swallowed hard. He understood then that this wasn't arrogance. This wasn't a show of skill. This was survival, passed down from a man whose shadow still haunted every corner of SEAL history. He realized something else. Elena Ward wasn't just a soldier. She was a continuation of a legacy, a living testament to the ghost's unmatched precision and discipline. The wind whispered across the desert as Marcus sat beside her. The sun dipped below the horizon, turning the sky blood red. Marcus knew one thing with certainty. The ghost's legend had returned not as a man, but as Elena Ward, and her first shot through the storm had revealed everything. Marcus didn't yet know the full story, didn't yet understand the depths of her past, or the full measure of her connection to the ghost. But he knew that whatever came next, the woman sitting beside him, silent, precise, and deadly, would change the course of their training, their missions, and perhaps everything they believed about the limits of human skill. In the desert, under a sky bleeding into night, one truth was undeniable. Elena Ward was unstoppable. One shot had shattered the illusion that legends were gone. The ghost was not gone. He had never left. And Marcus realized, with awe and unease, that he was witnessing history being written one deadly, precise shot at a time. The morning sun cast long shadows across Coronado Base, but Marcus Halle felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Pacific breeze. The memory of Elena Ward's impossible shots in the Nevada desert lingered in his mind like a ghost. The precision, the calm, the uncanny awareness, none of it fit the profile of a mere recruit. And that small cross etched on the bullet casing haunted him more than he cared to admit. Marcus couldn't let it go. The ghost had been a legend, a story whispered in hushed tones, almost mythological. And yet here was Elena, moving, shooting, calculating in ways that mirrored the stories almost perfectly. Something was off, and Marcus needed to understand it. By mid-morning, under the guise of extra practice, Marcus found himself wandering toward the classified records room. He had been trained to follow orders, to respect boundaries, but curiosity and the weight of what he had witnessed overpowered every protocol. The door to the records room was guarded, of course, but he slipped past the distracted junior officer and entered, heart pounding in his chest. Rows of sealed files stretched across the room, their contents carefully catalogued. Marcus's hands trembled as he located the section marked Elite Sniper Candidates, Confidential. Names, training records, evaluation reports, but nothing on Elena Ward. That was unusual. Extremely unusual. Every recruit had a file. Every candidate had documentation. Yet hers was missing. He searched further, cross-referencing databases, typing names, service numbers, and previous assignments. And then, buried deep under restricted access logs, he found it, a file labeled only GH01, Protish Training, Classified. He hesitated. The designation was clear, Ghost, but the details were minimal. Mostly operational notes, mission codes, and a single, almost cryptic entry. Subject chosen. Training continued. Skill transfer priority. Absolute. Marcus swallowed hard. Skill transfer. Absolute. That had to mean Elena. The file listed a protégé trained under Ghost himself. There was no discharge record, no mission failure, no death-only cryptic references and training milestones. A sudden awareness struck him. Ghost hadn't disappeared. He had chosen someone. And that someone wasn't just a recruit. That someone was Elena. Marcus leaned against the wall, the file trembling in his hands. He had always believed in the Ghost as a symbol, a legend of perfection. But now he realized the truth. The man had existed, and he had trained someone to carry on his work. And the level of skill he had witnessed in Nevada wasn't coincidence. It was deliberate, painstakingly honed, passed down in secrecy. He closed the file carefully, almost reverently, and stepped back into the sunlight. Questions consumed him. How long had she trained with him? Why hadn't anyone spoken about this? Why had the Ghost disappeared entirely, leaving only Elena to continue his work in silence? Later that evening, Marcus approached Elena cautiously. She was on the ridge overlooking the base, cleaning her rifle under the fading light. Her movements were deliberate, precise, almost ritualistic. The sun glinted off her scope, and for a moment, Marcus felt the weight of her presence pressing against him. "I looked into your file," he said carefully, keeping his voice low. Elena paused. Her eyes, gray and calm, lifted toward him. There was no shock, no anger, only a faint acknowledgement, like a quiet river acknowledging the passing of a storm. "You shouldn't," she said softly. Marcus took a deep breath. "I had to. I need to understand. Who trained you? How did you get like this?" Elena's gaze drifted toward the horizon, the setting sun painting her face in fiery orange. "He did," she said finally. "Carter Holloway. The Ghost. He found me when no one else would, when I had nothing left. He saved me, and he taught me everything I needed to survive. Everything I needed to be precise. Everything I needed to carry forward his legacy." Marcus felt a chill. Her words weren't boastful. They were simple statements of fact, spoken with the weight of someone who had lived them. He realized she wasn't claiming glory. She was honoring a life and a legacy that had shaped her entirely. "But why Coronado?" Marcus asked. "Why not? Another program? Why hide all this?" Elena's gaze hardened slightly, gray eyes flicking back to him. "Because some lessons aren't meant for everyone. Because some skills, some burdens, only the chosen can carry. The Ghost trained me for more than drills or missions. He trained me to be a weapon of purpose, to act when no one else could, to survive when all hope is gone. Coronado is just the beginning. Marcus swallowed hard, realizing the enormity of what she was saying. Elena Ward wasn't just a skilled sniper. She was a living continuation of a man whose name was legend, whose skills had become the standard against which all others were measured. And now she bore that standard silently, flawlessly, and without fanfare. Over the next few days, Marcus tried to observe her more closely, to understand the rhythms of her training. He watched how she adjusted her stance, how she calculated wind and distance, how she predicted the movements of the targets. Every motion was deliberate, precise, almost supernatural. And yet, he realized she didn't just rely on technique, she relied on instinct honed by experience, guided by a mentor whose methods were unmatched. One night, Marcus stayed late at the range, trying to follow her through a long-range drill. She didn't speak. She didn't acknowledge him. She simply worked, laying down rounds with a calm that made him feel frantic in comparison. And then, quietly, almost without notice, she paused and whispered something under her breath. "Holloway." Marcus froze. It wasn't just a name. It was a connection, a tether to the past, to a man who had vanished, but whose influence was alive in every movement she made. He realized then that everything he had witnessed, the impossible shots, the calm in the storm, the uncanny precision, was the result of years of direct mentorship. Ghost hadn't just trained her in skill. He had trained her in survival, focus, and legacy. The realization was almost too much to bear. Marcus had always believed in legends. He had trained to face the best of the best. But Elena Ward? She wasn't just the best. She was the last link to a legend whose skills transcended time and circumstance. The following morning, as the recruits gathered for a new set of exercises, Marcus approached Elena once more. He felt the need to confront the truth. "So, all those shots, all that skill, it's because of him," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena nodded, calm as ever. "It's because of what he taught me, and what I chose to carry forward. One day, you'll understand that skill without purpose is meaningless. The ghost taught me purpose." Marcus realized then that understanding her wasn't about observing drills or calculating trajectories. It was about acknowledging a legacy, a life shaped by a man who had been more myth than mortal. And in that realization, he felt both awe and unease. He watched her move across the range, handling her rifle with reverence and precision, and he understood one undeniable truth. Elena Ward was not just a recruit. She was a force shaped by a legend, carrying a history that no one else could comprehend. And in her silence, he glimpsed the full weight of her purpose, a purpose born from the ghost himself, precise, relentless, and unyielding. Marcus knew that the coming days, the next drills, the next missions, would test him in ways he had never imagined. But one fact was clear. He wasn't facing a mere recruit anymore. He was facing a living connection to one of the most dangerous, precise, and legendary snipers the world had ever known. The ghost was gone, but in Elena Ward, his presence was undeniable, shaping every shot, every movement, and every decision she made. And Marcus realized with awe and a hint of fear, understanding her legacy wasn't optional. To survive beside her, to operate in the same field, he had to accept it fully. As the sun dipped over the Pacific, painting the base in crimson and gold, Marcus exhaled slowly. The classified truth was now clear. Elena Ward was the ghost's protégé, trained to continue his work, to carry forward his precision, and to act when no one else could. One day, he would see the full extent of what that meant, and when he did, the story of the ghost would no longer be a legend. It would be reality. The night air over northern Syria was heavy and still, the only sound the faint hum of the helicopter slicing through darkness. Marcus Holley checked his gear for the third time, fingers shaking not from fear, but from anticipation. He had trained for high-risk operations before, but this mission was different. It wasn't a drill. It wasn't a test. This was real. Lives were on the line. And among the team, one presence was quietly commanding more attention than anyone dared admit. Elena Ward. She sat cross-legged in the shadowed corner of the transport. Her rifle across her lap, scope secured. Eyes closed in concentration. Marcus watched her, noting the calm aura that surrounded her like an invisible shield. Other members of the team were tense, whispering among themselves, checking ammo, double-checking coordinates. Elena? She was still, calm, unflinching. Marcus couldn't help but wonder what Ghost had taught her that made her untouchable in moments like this. The helicopter touched down on a rocky plateau overlooking the target village. The mission was simple in theory. Extract a high-value informant and neutralize a heavily armed insurgent cell. But Marcus knew better. Simple was a term military planners used to lull soldiers into false security. This mission was anything but. The team disembarked silently, moving with precision through the shadows. Elena led the way with no need for guidance, as if the terrain had been etched into her memory from prior operations. Marcus followed closely, struggling to keep pace with her silent efficiency. The first obstacle appeared almost immediately, a heavily fortified checkpoint. Marcus could hear the murmurs of insurgents up ahead, the clatter of weapons being readied. He froze, unsure how to approach, when Elena knelt behind a boulder, scanning the checkpoint through her scope. She exhaled slowly, adjusting for distance and wind, and then fired. One shot. Dead center. A guard dropped silently, his rifle clattering to the ground. Another shot followed seconds later, taking down a second guard before anyone could react. Marcus felt his stomach twist. The precision, the calm, the absolute control of chaos, it was the same unnerving skill he had witnessed in Nevada, amplified by the reality of live combat. The team moved forward, stunned but grateful for her efficiency. Elena never spoke, never hesitated, never faltered. She simply led, calculated, and neutralized threats, as if she had been born into this exact moment, trained by a master whose legend defied logic. Marcus realized something chilling. She wasn't just a sniper. She was a tactician, a ghost in the chaos, a silent harbinger of death for anyone foolish enough to step in her path. Hours passed as they moved closer to the target compound. Marcus noticed subtle shifts in Elena's behavior, tiny adjustments in posture, the way she scanned rooftops, the faint whispers under her breath, likely calculations of angles and trajectories. Every step was deliberate, every motion precise. He could see the influence of Ghost in her movements, the echoes of mentorship that had shaped her into something more than human. When the team finally reached the perimeter of the compound, the tension was palpable. Insurgents were armed and alert, their shadows flickering against walls, illuminated by sporadic lights. Marcus's pulse pounded as he prepared to engage. He thought he understood strategy, but Elena moved like she had already anticipated every possibility. "Cover me," she said quietly, voice steady, commanding without needing to assert dominance. Marcus nodded, covering her advance, and watched as she scaled the compound's wall with silent precision. She moved like a shadow, climbing faster and quieter than anyone should have been able to. Inside, chaos erupted. Alarms blared, insurgents scrambled, but Elena was already positioned on the upper floor, rifle steady, calculating her shots. Marcus followed, rifle raised, but his own movements felt sluggish compared to her fluid efficiency. She whispered commands to the team, directing them without raising her voice, orchestrating the operation with the calm authority of someone who had been trained by the Ghost himself. Then came the pivotal moment. A sniper from the insurgent cell had been positioned to take a shot at the team. Marcus spotted the glint of the scope from across the compound, realized the danger, and hesitated. Elena didn't. She adjusted her scope, exhaled, and fired. One shot. The enemy sniper slumped silently. Marcus felt a chill. The precision, the timing, the foresight, it wasn't just skill. It was instinct trained to perfection, honed by someone whose presence haunted every bullet, every calculation. He realized then that Ghost's influence wasn't a memory. It was alive in her hands, in her eyes, in every motion she made under fire. The team pressed forward, neutralizing threats and securing the informant. Elena moved silently among the chaos, covering every angle, anticipating every move. Marcus struggled to keep up mentally and physically, realizing he was witnessing something extraordinary. She wasn't just a soldier. She was the embodiment of a legend, a living bridge to the Ghost's unmatched skill and discipline. Finally, they reached the extraction point. The helicopter hovered, waiting. Marcus glanced back at Elena. She was calm, almost serene, rifle slung, eyes scanning for any remaining threats. He approached, wanting to ask the questions that burned in his mind, but the moment wasn't right. There was no time. They were in the middle of a war zone, every second counting. As the team boarded the helicopter, Marcus felt the weight of realization settle over him. The Ghost hadn't just trained Elena to shoot. He had trained her to survive, to command, to anticipate, to dominate in ways that defied conventional understanding. Every drill, every whisper, every perfect shot he had witnessed before was nothing compared to this. The Ghost's training unleashed in a real mission, with real lives at stake. The helicopter lifted off, engines screaming against the night sky. Marcus watched the village disappear beneath them, the chaos left behind a testament to their efficiency and to Elena's unmatched skill. She sat silently across from him, eyes closed, rifle across her lap, as if the mission had been nothing more than another day at the range. Marcus realized then that understanding her wasn't optional. He had to accept her skills, her history, and her connection to the Ghost fully, if he was going to survive the missions ahead. She wasn't just carrying the legacy of a legend. She was the legacy, alive and precise, a force that commanded respect without speaking a word. Hours later, back at base, Marcus approached her once more. The adrenaline had faded, but the awe remained. "Elena," he said softly, careful not to startle her, "how do you do all of that?" She looked at him, gray eyes calm but sharp. "I've been trained by the best," she said simply. "I've seen what precision can do. I've seen what survival requires. And I've carried it forward. That's all there is to it." Marcus shook his head, overwhelmed. It wasn't just skill, not just training. It was something deeper, a philosophy, a discipline, a connection to a man whose legend had haunted the SEAL community for years. And now, in Elena Ward, it was alive and unstoppable. That night, Marcus lay in his cot, staring at the ceiling. He realized something vital. His mission wasn't the last he would fight beside her. And every mission ahead would demand that he understand her fully, embrace her legacy, and trust in the skill passed down by the Ghost. He knew, with a mixture of awe and fear, that nothing would ever be the same. Elena Ward wasn't just a sniper. She was the culmination of a legend, the continuation of a legacy, and the embodiment of every lesson, every calculation, every ghostly whisper of the man who had trained her. And Marcus understood finally that surviving beside her would require more than skill. It would require faith in the Ghost and in the protégé who had become more than human. The night outside was quiet, but Marcus knew the storm had only just begun. Coronado Base was quiet in the early morning, but Marcus Hawley felt the tension pressing down like a storm. Today wasn't a regular drill. Today was a simulation designed to push the recruits to their breaking points, physically, mentally, and emotionally. But Marcus knew this wasn't a test for Elena Ward, for her. It was a proving ground, a stage to demonstrate the lessons of the ghost, her mentor whose legacy weighed on her shoulders with silent insistence. The briefing room was tense. The instructors outlined a multi-stage operation, extraction of a hostage in hostile territory, precision strikes under fire, and navigating a complex network of obstacles designed to challenge every recruit. Marcus listened, nerves coiled tight, while glancing at Elena. She sat quietly, absorbing every detail with that calm, unreadable focus that unnerved everyone around her. Once the simulation began, it was chaos. Marcus and his team were dropped into a mock urban environment filled with smoke, hidden obstacles, and live opposition forces. Shouts, simulated gunfire, and alarms filled the air. Marcus's heart raced as he ducked behind cover, but Elena moved with the same calm precision he had witnessed in Nevada and Syria. She scanned, calculated, and moved forward like a shadow, unbroken by panic or pressure. The first challenge was a rooftop sniper engagement. Marcus spotted a target, a moving silhouette, across a simulated urban plaza. He adjusted his scope, held his breath, and fired. The shot missed by inches. Panic threatened to take him over, but then he caught sight of Elena, kneeling on another rooftop, rifle steady, scope adjusted, wind and distance perfectly accounted for. One shot, dead center. Another shot. The target collapsed exactly where she predicted. Marcus swallowed hard, realizing he couldn't compete in skill or instinct. Elena wasn't just precise. She was a weapon honed by the ghost, trained to anticipate every variable, every gust of wind, every heartbeat of a target. The next stage pushed them even further. A simulated hostage rescue with multiple hostiles scattered through a narrow corridor. Marcus led part of the team, scanning doorways and clearing rooms cautiously, but he felt disoriented by the rapidity and unpredictability of the exercise. Elena, however, moved silently ahead, covering angles without alerting enemies, neutralizing threats with silent, precise movements that seemed almost preternatural. As the simulation progressed, Marcus noticed something new. Elena didn't just move with precision, she anticipated human behavior. She read movements before they happened, calculated angles that no one else noticed, and coordinated the team without a word. Her presence alone shaped the flow of the exercise. Midway through the operation, the instructors introduced an unexpected challenge. A double hostage scenario, where the location of one hostage was unknown, and time was limited. Panic surged among the recruits. Marcus felt his chest tighten, struggling to reconcile the simulated chaos with his own training. But Elena remained steady, scanning, calculating, and moving with unnerving calm. Marcus watched in awe as she located the first hostage with a single observation, reading the smallest clues, subtle shadows, and minute environmental changes. She signaled silently to the team, guiding them without speaking, and led the rescue with flawless execution. The second hostage was hidden in a different building. The team hesitated, unsure how to proceed, but Elena already had a plan. She adjusted her scope, calculated lines of sight, and moved forward alone, confident yet cautious. Marcus followed at a distance, keeping cover while observing her methodical approach. Every step, every breath, every calculated movement reflected years of discipline and training under the ghost. She neutralized simulated threats with unmatched efficiency, never hesitating, never faltering, never missing. Finally, she reached the second hostage. Marcus noticed something he hadn't before. Her eyes, gray and focused, betrayed a hint of intensity he had rarely seen. It wasn't fear, it was determination, a drive forged by survival, discipline, and the silent mentorship of a legend. As the team extracted the hostages, the final challenge loomed, a simulated long-range engagement with moving targets under chaotic conditions. Marcus lined up, adjusting for wind, distance, and light. His shots fell short. His confidence wavered. Panic gnawed at him, but he caught sight of Elena. She knelt calmly, scope aligned perfectly, breath measured, finger poised. One shot, dead center. Another shot. Each target fell exactly where predicted. Marcus felt awe, fear, and admiration blend in a single overwhelming realization. Elena Ward wasn't just skilled. She was a living embodiment of the Ghost's legacy, trained to perfection, capable of execution that surpassed human expectation. The simulation concluded with instructors gathered around, visibly impressed. "I've never seen anything like this in my career," one remarked. "She's beyond elite." Another nodded. "The Ghost trained her well. More than well, he created a force." Marcus approached Elena afterward, heart pounding, questions burning in his mind. How do you do all of this under pressure?" he asked. Elena didn't smile. She merely met his gaze, storm gray eyes steady, unwavering. "It's not skill alone," she said softly. "It's preparation, discipline, and understanding. I've trained for this my whole life. Ghost taught me that precision isn't enough. You have to anticipate, adapt, and survive. Every movement, every shot, every decision counts." Marcus felt a chill. It wasn't arrogance in her voice. It was the calm authority of someone who had survived the impossible, who had trained under a legend, and who now carried that legacy forward. Later, as the recruits debriefed, the full weight of her achievement became clear. Every stage of the simulation had been executed flawlessly by Elena, with Marcus and the team relying on her silent guidance more than they realized. She had not only completed the ultimate test herself, but had lifted the performance of everyone around her. That night, Marcus lay awake, replaying every shot, every movement, every decision. He realized something crucial. Understanding her skill wasn't enough. He had to accept the depth of her training, the legacy of the Ghost, and the weight of responsibility she carried silently. She wasn't just a sniper. She was a strategist, a leader, and a force shaped by a mentor whose legend transcended years and missions. Marcus finally approached her under the moonlight, the base quiet around them. "Elena," he said softly, careful not to break the stillness. "I see now. It's not just your shots. It's everything. The way you think, move, lead. It's him, isn't it?" She nodded slightly, her gray eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Yes, but it's not just him. It's what I choose to carry forward. His lessons are a tool, not a crutch. I don't rely on him. I rely on what he taught me, and what I've learned myself." Marcus felt awe wash over him. He realized fully that Elena wasn't just executing orders or demonstrating skill. She was embodying the philosophy, discipline, and precision of a legend, and adding her own mastery to it. The ultimate test had revealed more than skill. It had revealed purpose, discipline, and a living continuation of a legend. Marcus knew that the days ahead would demand trust, courage, and reliance on a protege who was more than human in every measure. As the moon rose higher, casting long silver shadows over Coronado, Marcus understood the truth. Elena Ward wasn't just the best sniper he had ever met. She was the Ghost's legacy brought to life. She carried every lesson, every precision movement, and every silent command forward, not for glory, not for recognition, but because it was her duty, her survival, and her path. Marcus realized one undeniable truth. The ultimate test wasn't over. The challenges ahead, in missions, in combat, in life, would demand everything she had been taught, and he would have to keep pace, not just in skill, but in understanding the weight of the legacy she carried. The ultimate test had ended, but the real trials were just beginning. And Marcus knew, with awe and fear, that surviving beside her would require more than training. It would require belief, trust, and acceptance of the force she had become. The night was silent, but Marcus could feel it in his bones. Elena Ward, the ghost's protégé, had passed the ultimate test, and nothing would ever be the same again. The sun had barely risen over the Pacific as Marcus Hawley and the SEAL unit prepared for deployment. Today wasn't training. Today was real. Intelligence had confirmed a high-value insurgent target moving through a remote border region, and the mission was critical: intercept, neutralize, and extract vital intel. The stakes were higher than anything Marcus had faced, and he couldn't help but feel the weight of anticipation pressing on him. But even as adrenaline surged through him, Marcus's eyes kept returning to Elena Ward. She moved with quiet precision, checking her rifle, securing her gear, and scanning the horizon. Unlike the rest of the team, her calm was absolute. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't impatient. She simply existed in perfect harmony with the mission, as though the chaos around her didn't exist. Marcus had witnessed incredible skill in Nevada, in Syria, during the ultimate test, but he knew this was different. This was the real thing. The insertion was silent. The team advanced under cover of darkness, shadows blending with the terrain. Elena moved first, naturally, like a shadow leading them through danger. Marcus tried to follow, heart pounding, but every step reminded him how much he was still learning from her. She didn't lead with force. She led with precision, awareness, and calculation. As they approached the target compound, the wind shifted. Marcus caught movement on the ridge, scouts, armed, alert. He tensed, preparing to engage. But Elena had already assessed the situation. One hand gesture, subtle, nearly imperceptible, and the team froze. Her eyes scanned the ridge, calculated distances, predicted movement, and she acted. One shot, dead center. Another shot. Silence fell. Marcus realized then that what he had called skill was only part of the equation. Her precision wasn't just physical, it was tactical, instinctual. Guided by a lifetime of mentorship from the ghost, each shot was premeditated. A prediction of human behavior in motion, executed without hesitation. The team moved forward. Marcus noticed something new. Elena wasn't just neutralizing threats. She was orchestrating the operation in real time, adjusting positions, signaling threats, and guiding the team without a single word. Her presence transformed the group from a trained unit into an unstoppable force. Marcus felt a mix of awe and fear. He was witnessing the ghost's legacy in action. Inside the compound, chaos erupted. Insurgents scrambled, weapons firing, alarms blaring. Marcus followed the plan, covering angles and advancing cautiously. Elena moved with eerie calm, neutralizing threats efficiently, guiding the hostages to safety, and coordinating the team's movements with almost supernatural foresight. Then came the pivotal moment. The target, a highly skilled sniper, appeared on a rooftop overlooking the extraction point. Marcus froze, spotting the glint of a scope. His hands shook slightly as he prepared to take a shot, but he knew he was too slow. The sniper was trained, fast, and deadly. Elena moved before he could react. She adjusted her position, accounted for wind, distance, and elevation, and fired. One shot, dead center. The enemy sniper slumped. Marcus couldn't comprehend her timing, her calm, her calculation. Everything was flawless. The ghost's training wasn't just present. It was alive, flowing through her actions with terrifying efficiency. As the team extracted the hostages and secured the compound, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and awe. The mission had been executed with near-perfect precision, and Elena had led the charge without hesitation, without error, without the slightest falter. He realized then that he had underestimated her, not just her skill, but the depth of her legacy. Once the mission was complete, the team returned to base. Marcus approached Elena quietly, needing to understand something that had been haunting him since Nevada. "Elena," he said softly, careful not to break the silence. "How? How do you do all of this? Every mission, every shot. It's like you're untouchable." Elena looked at him, gray eyes calm, almost serene. "I'm not untouchable," she said softly. "I'm prepared. Ghost taught me that skill alone isn't enough. You need discipline, anticipation, and purpose. Every shot I take, every move I make carries intention. That's how you survive. That's how you win." Marcus nodded slowly, realizing the truth in her words. He had seen her in drills, in simulations, in live fire exercises, but seeing her in actual combat revealed the full weight of her training. The Ghost's legacy wasn't just technical mastery. It was survival, calculation, and the ability to act decisively when everything was chaos. That night, Marcus found her alone on the ridge overlooking the Pacific, rifle across her knees, staring into the horizon. The moonlight illuminated her face, calm, focused, untouchable. Marcus approached quietly, unsure how to speak the thoughts that churned in his mind. "You carry him with you," Marcus said softly. "Every shot, every move. It's like he's here with you." Elena didn't look away. "He is," she said quietly. "Not in body, but in everything he taught me. Every calculation, every instinct, every choice I make, he's there. Ghost isn't gone. He lives in the skills he passed on, in the discipline he instilled, in the lessons that shape every decision I make." Marcus swallowed hard. The weight of her words hit him fully. Elena Ward wasn't just a sniper. She was a living embodiment of a legend. She carried the Ghost's legacy forward, executing it flawlessly, silently, and without fanfare. And Marcus realized something else. In her presence, the Ghost wasn't just history. He was alive. Weeks passed. Missions grew more complex, more dangerous, more demanding. And in every mission, Elena's precision, calm, and leadership were the difference between success and disaster. Marcus found himself relying on her not just for skill, but for guidance, for strategy, for survival. He understood now that she wasn't just carrying out orders, she was defining the mission itself. Then came the final test. Intelligence indicated a high-value target, an insurgent leader, responsible for multiple attacks on Allied forces, was traveling through a fortified area. The mission was critical, with lives on the line and consequences beyond measure. Marcus and the team advanced, tense and alert. Elena led the operation, analyzing terrain, predicting enemy movements, and coordinating the team silently. Every shot she took was deliberate, every command precise. The mission unfolded flawlessly, and Marcus realized the full magnitude of her abilities. She wasn't just a protege. She was a master, forged by the Ghost and refined by her own experiences. Finally, as the target was neutralized and the team secured critical intel, Marcus looked at Elena. She was calm, steady, almost serene, rifle slung over her shoulder. He realized something profound. The Ghost had lived, trained her, and through her, his legacy had not just survived, it had evolved. Elena turned to him, gray eyes meeting his, calm but intense. "The Ghost taught me everything I needed to survive. But I'm more than a shadow of him. I am myself. And that's how legends live on, not by repeating the past, but by carrying it forward." Marcus nodded slowly, awe and respect swelling within him. He understood now that Elena Ward wasn't just carrying a legacy, she was living it, redefining it, and proving that legends never truly die. They endure, evolve, and live on through those who embody their lessons. As the sun rose over the Pacific, casting gold and crimson across the horizon, Marcus realized one undeniable truth. The Ghost lives on. Not in stories, not in whispers, not in myth, but in Elena Ward, the woman who had trained, adapted, and mastered everything he had left behind. And Marcus understood something else. Surviving beside her, learning from her, and trusting in her abilities was not just a necessity, it was an honor. The wind carried the faint scent of salt and gunpowder as Elena adjusted her rifle, scanning the horizon with the calm certainty that had defined every mission. Marcus watched, humbled and inspired. The ghost had trained her, yes, but she had become more than any legend. She was unstoppable, precise, and alive in every sense. And in that moment, Marcus knew with certainty, the ghost lives on. Through Elena Ward, every lesson, every skill, every act of precision and survival continued. The legend wasn't gone. It was alive in her hands, in her eyes, in every calculated, deadly motion she made. And the world had yet to witness the full extent of what that meant. The ghost may have vanished years ago, but in Elena Ward, his legacy was eternal.